Tinubu has had a cabinet since August 2023. Some of those ministers have delivered, some have been invisible, and some, by any measurable standard of governance performance, constitutional integrity, and national interest, have been dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of being physically threatening, dangerous in the sense that matters more to a country's long-term stability, dangerous to governance outcomes, dangerous to constitutional norms, dangerous to the institutional trust that a functioning democracy depends on, and dangerous to Nigeria's 2027 political health. And the question AFRONEWSHQ is asking today is, why are they still there? This is not an anti-Tinubu video. It is not a party political assessment. It is the application of the same analytical standard to Tinubu's cabinet that AFRONEWSHQ applies to every institution that shapes Nigerian political life. We are going through the list. We are naming the ministers. We are stating precisely what the documented record shows about their performance, their conduct, and their impact on Nigeria's governance. And we are asking the question that Nigeria's media should be asking every week until the cabinet is functioning at the standard a country of 220 million people deserves. Most channels will give you the headline. We give you the architecture behind it. If you've never been here before, you just found Nigeria's most analytical political channel. Subscribe, because what comes next in this video is the part they hope you never piece together. What dangerous means in this analysis? Before we go through the list, AFRONEWSHQ must define its terms. A minister is dangerous in this analysis not because of their personal character, their ethnicity, their religion, or their political affiliation. A minister is dangerous by one or more of four documented criteria. Criterion 1. Policy harm. Their ministerial decisions have produced documented negative outcomes for significant numbers of Nigerians, and those outcomes are attributable to ministerial action or inaction rather than to factors outside ministerial control. Criterion 2. Constitutional overreach. Their conduct in office has involved documented violation of or disregard for constitutional constraints on ministerial authority, including court orders, National Assembly oversight, and fundamental rights guarantees. Criterion 3. Institutional damage. Their occupation of a ministerial position has damaged the institution they head, either through politicization, through capacity destruction, or through the redirection of institutional resources toward personal or political objectives. Criterion 4. 2027 liability. Their continued presence in Tinubu's cabinet creates documented political liability for the administration's 2027 re-election by providing the opposition with sustained legitimate grievance material that cannot be rebutted because it is grounded in the minister's own documented conduct. Every minister on this list meets at least 2 of those 4 criteria. Most meet 3. The list is not exhaustive. It is the updated version of the ministers whose continued presence in the Tinubu cabinet is most consequential for Nigerian governance and most analytically significant for understanding the administration's direction before 2027. Why this list is different from previous versions. AFRONEWSHQ has covered Tinubu's dangerous ministers before. This is the updated list. Updated means 3 things. First, the passage of time has produced additional documented evidence about these ministers' governance records. Second, some ministers whose situations have improved have been removed from the list. Third, some ministers whose situations have deteriorated have been elevated in the ranking. The update also reflects the 2027 electoral context. A minister who was merely ineffective in 2023 is a governance problem. A minister who is ineffective in 2026, 18 months before an election in which the APC must defend its governance record, is an electoral liability on top of a governance problem. That double weight shapes the updated list. The one ministerial portfolio that has been simultaneously the most constitutionally significant and the most analytically neglected by Nigerian political commentary. We will identify them at the end. The answer may surprise you. The one ministerial portfolio that has simultaneously been the most constitutionally significant and the most analytically neglected by Nigerian political commentary. We will name it and explain why it matters. Number 1. Nyesom Wike, FTC Minister. The documented record: multiple demolition operations conducted in defiance of subsisting federal high court orders, active contempt proceedings that have not been enforced, the conversion of the FTC ministerial role into an instrument of his personal Rivers State political operations, and a sustained conflict of interest between his federal responsibilities and his active political warfare against a sitting APC governor in his home state. Wike is dangerous on 3 of the 4 criteria: policy harm to Abuja residents whose properties were demolished in breach of court orders, constitutional overreach in defying judicial authority, and 2027 liability through the sustained negative press his conduct generates for the Tinubu administration. He remains the single most discussed minister in Nigerian political commentary for reasons that are entirely negative for the government. Number 2. Lateef Fagbemi, Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. The AGF's role in a democracy is to serve as the chief law officer of the Federation, advising the government on constitutional matters, prosecuting federal criminal cases, and defending the Constitution against political interference. The documented record of Fagbemi's tenure raises specific concerns. The AGF's office has not moved to resolve the Sharia constitutional crisis, 12 states operating criminal courts in documented tension with Section 10 of the Constitution, despite that crisis producing internationally visible human rights violations. The AGF's office has not initiated the nolli prosequi or the legal framework clarification that the Nnamdi Kanu prosecution's constitutionally compromised foundation requires, and the AGF's public positions on electoral law and party management disputes have, in the documented perception of opposition lawyers and constitutional scholars, favored administration interests over constitutional principle. An AGF who is perceived as a political operative rather than a constitutional officer is dangerous to the institutional integrity of every legal proceeding his office touches. 3. Bello Matawalle, Minister of State for Defense. Matawalle's presence in the Tinubu cabinet is analytically complex. As a former Zamfara state governor whose administration was criticized for negotiating with and in some documented instances facilitating the activities of the very bandit groups that have devastated his home state, his placement as Minister of State for Defense is constitutionally awkward at minimum. The Northern Governors Forum's dissatisfaction with the federal security response to Northwest banditry, which has been explicit and documented, includes dissatisfaction with a security architecture that includes a former governor whose own security record in the most affected state is contested. He is dangerous on the institutional damage and 2027 liability criteria. His presence makes it harder for the Tinubu administration to present a credible northern security narrative. 4. Mohammed Idris, Minister of Information and National Orientation. The Information Ministry's function in a democracy is to communicate government policy with accuracy, to facilitate media freedom, and to maintain the government's accountability relationship with the press. The documented record of Idris's tenure includes multiple instances of government communication that was factually challenged by independent journalists and civil society organizations, a pattern of dismissing critical press coverage as misinformation without engaging with the specific claims, and the deployment of the ministry's communications infrastructure primarily toward managing the administration's image rather than informing the Nigerian public. A minister whose communication style generates more credibility challenges than it resolves is a governance liability. In a 2027 context where the administration's record on inflation, security, and public services will be the opposition's primary material, A communications operation that lacks public trust is an electoral danger. Number 5. Nyesom Wike, second entry. The FCT Development Problem, FCT Minister, Infrastructure Dimension. This is a separate entry from Wike's political conduct because it deserves independent treatment. The FCT's infrastructure development under Wike has generated specific documented concerns beyond the demolition controversy. The prioritization of road projects in Abuja's high-income districts over infrastructure needs in Abuja's satellite towns and in the FCT's 6 area councils, where a significant portion of the FCT's poorer residents live, represents a distributive justice problem that has been documented by FCT civil society organizations. An FCT minister who allocates Federal Capital Territory resources primarily toward the visible aesthetics of Abuja's central districts while satellite town infrastructure deteriorates is failing the constitutional mandate of the FCT ministry toward all of the territory's residents. The most analytically neglected dangerous portfolio is not on most people's radar. The Nigerian Education Ministry, currently occupied by Tunji Alausa, has received almost no analytical attention in Nigerian political commentary relative to its governance significance. Nigeria has the world's largest out-of-school children population, approximately 20 million children not in school, concentrated heavily in northern Nigeria. The Education Ministry's response to this crisis under the current administration has produced no documented structural improvement in out-of-school children numbers, no credible national reading program implementation, and no effective Basic Education Commission reform. A ministry that fails to address the world's largest out-of-school children crisis while its minister occupies himself with other public engagements is producing a generational governance failure whose consequences for Nigeria's 2027 to 2047 political economy are more significant than any of the political controversies that dominate Nigerian commentary. The Education Minister is not dangerous in the way Wike is dangerous. He is dangerous in a quieter and more consequential way by making Nigeria's human capital crisis worse through administrative absence and strategic neglect. The ministers who have improved, removed from the previous list. Analytical integrity requires acknowledging where the record has improved. Wale Edun at Finance has produced more coherent macroeconomic communication in 2025 and 2026 than the chaos of 2023 and early 2024 suggested was possible. The Naira's partial stabilization, the foreign exchange market's improved functioning relative to the unification shock, and the fiscal deficit management that has kept Nigeria's IMF program relationships functional, these are documented improvements that remove him from the most dangerous list on the institutional damage criterion. The minister whose continued presence is most inexplicable from Tinubu's own interest is not Wike, it is the AGF. The question AFRONEWSHQ planted at the start, whose continued presence is most strategically inexplicable from Tinubu's own political interest, has a specific answer. It is Lateef Fagbemi as AGF. Here is why. The AGF's office has the authority to resolve Tinubu's most politically costly legal liabilities with a simple legal instrument. The Nnamdi Kanu prosecution's nolle prosequi, executed by the AGF, produces the political dividend of a Southeast reconciliation gesture without requiring Tinubu to make a public presidential statement. The Sharia constitutional crisis's engagement, initiated by the AGF, demonstrates federal constitutional seriousness without requiring a confrontation with northern political actors. An AGF who is strategically creative with the legal tools available to him is one of Tinubu's most powerful 2027 political assets. An AGF who is passive and politically cautious with those same tools is a missed opportunity that compounds every week it persists. Fagbemi's continued presence is inexplicable not because he is malicious, but because he is not using the office's full strategic potential in Tinubu's interest. Now let us examine what this ministerial record means for Nigeria's democratic institutions and what the counter-arguments require us to acknowledge. What keeping dangerous ministers signals about a government? When a government retains ministers whose documented records meet the criteria for dangerous governance, it sends three specific institutional signals. First, that political loyalty is weighted above governance performance in cabinet management. A minister who remains in office despite a negative documented performance record is communicating that their political value to the president exceeds their governance cost to the country. In Wike's case, that message has been communicated repeatedly and publicly. The political calculation that keeps him in office, South-South coalition management, Rivers State political leverage, APC internal balance, is visible and rational from a political survival perspective, but it is irrational from a governance quality and democratic accountability perspective. And Nigerian citizens who experience the governance cost directly are entitled to know that the calculation is political rather than meritocratic. Second, that the constitutional oversight mechanisms, specifically the Senate confirmation and the National Assembly's ministerial oversight function, are not performing their accountability role. The National Assembly has the constitutional authority to summon ministers to defend their records, to conduct oversight hearings that generate public accountability, and to communicate to the president that specific ministerial conduct has lost legislative confidence. That authority has not been used assertively in the current assembly on the cases documented in this video. Third, that the 2027 opposition will have legitimate, documented, evidence-based campaign material that the APC cannot rebut because it is grounded in the government's own ministerial record. Every month a dangerous minister remains in office is a month of additional documented material for the Obi-ADC coalition's 2027 campaign narrative. The Tinubu administration is building the opposition's 2027 case for them. The strongest counter-argument. The most serious defense of the current cabinet composition, made by APC loyalists and by analysts sympathetic to the complexities of Nigerian coalition management, is this: cabinet management in Nigeria is not a governance quality exercise, it is a political survival exercise. Every minister in Tinubu's cabinet is there because they represent a political constituency, a regional interest, a party faction, or a personal loyalty that Tinubu needs to maintain his governing coalition. Removing Wike removes South-South political management. Removing Matawalle removes Northwest political cover. The cabinet is not a meritocracy, it is a coalition map. And judging it by governance performance standards misses the political survival logic that determines its composition. That counter-argument is accurate as a description of how Nigerian cabinets have always worked. It is not adequate as a defense of the current cabinet's specific governance failures. The argument that Nigerian cabinets cannot be judged by governance standards because they are political appointments itself is the most damaging thing about Nigerian governance. It is the admission that the interests of the coalition always precede the interests of the country. AFRONEWSHQ does not accept that admission as an argument for its continuation. The most effective cabinet reshuffle Tinubu can make before 2027 has nothing to do with Wike. Most commentary on Tinubu's cabinet reshuffle needs focuses on Wike, because Wike is the most visible and most controversial figure. But the reshuffle that would most significantly improve the administration's 2027 electoral position is not about Wike. It is about the Education Ministry. An education minister who launches a credible, funded, implemented national reading program with measurable targets for out-of-school children reduction that can be reported on in the 12 months before the 2027 election generates the kind of governance narrative that is both electorally powerful and constitutionally legitimate. Parents across Nigeria, across every ethnic and religious line, want their children educated. A government that delivers on that specific, universal, apolitical demand is a government that has built electoral goodwill that no opposition coalition's political arithmetic can easily override. Tinubu's most dangerous ministers are not only the ones generating controversy, they include the ones generating silence where consequential action should be visible. Democratic accountability assessment. A government that retains ministers whose documented records meet multiple criteria for dangerous governance is a government that has chosen political coalition management over constitutional governance quality. That choice is comprehensible as political survival logic. It is not defensible as democratic governance, and it creates the documented opposition material that makes 2027 more competitive than it needs to be. The most inexplicable dangerous presence. We said we would identify the minister whose continued presence is most strategically inexplicable from Tinubu's own political interest. The answer, delivered in pattern interrupt number 2, is Lateef Fagbemi as AGF. Not because he is the most damaging minister on the list, but because he is the one whose office holds the most untapped political potential for Tinubu's 2027 positioning, and that potential has been consistently underutilized. A strategically active AGF who uses the legal tools of his office to resolve the Kanu prosecution, to engage with the Sharia constitutional question, and to credibly position the federal government as a constitutional actor rather than a political one, is worth more to Tinubu's 2027 campaign than any media offensive or infrastructure announcement. That potential is being wasted. The most analytically neglected portfolio. We said we would name the ministerial portfolio that is simultaneously most constitutionally significant and most analytically neglected. The answer is education. The out-of-school children crisis is the most consequential governance failure in Nigeria's current administration by any long-term national interest metric. It receives a fraction of the commentary that Wike's Abuja demolitions receive. That inversion of attention relative to consequence is a failure of Nigerian political commentary that AFRONEWSHQ names directly. What should happen before 2027? AFRONEWSHQ does not only identify problems, we identify what accountability looks like. First, the National Assembly's oversight committees should conduct public ministerial performance hearings specifically for the FCT Ministry on the demolition and contempt proceedings, for the AGF's office on the Kanu prosecution and the Sharia constitutional question, and for the Defense Ministry on the documented northern security inadequacy. Public hearings that produce a ministerial record are the legislator's most powerful accountability tool. They have not been used assertively on these cases. Second, Nigerian civil society and press should maintain the ministerial performance record as a living document, updated, published, and circulated regularly. The concept of a danger list is powerful precisely because it creates a performance accountability standard that ministers must respond to publicly. Third, Tinubu should conduct a substantive cabinet reshuffle before the 2027 primary season opens, one that is driven by governance performance assessment rather than by political coalition management alone. The reshuffle that removes the most documented governance liabilities is the reshuffle that gives the APC the most defensible 2027 narrative. 3 signals to watch. First, whether the National Assembly summons Wike will defend the FCT demolition contempt proceedings in a public oversight hearing. A summons signals that the legislature is functioning as a constitutional accountability mechanism. Its absence signals the opposite. Second, whether the AGF's office makes any public move on the Kanu prosecution before the 2027 primary season, a plea framework announcement, a nolle prosequi, or even a public statement acknowledging the prosecution's constitutional complications signals strategic legal thinking. Continued silence signals continued passivity. Third, whether Tinubu's next reshuffle removes any minister from this list. A reshuffle that removes a documented governance liability signals that political management and governance quality are being balanced. A reshuffle that leaves every minister on this list in place signals the opposite, that political coalition management has permanently displaced governance accountability in the Tinubu administration's cabinet decisions. Nigeria's most dangerous ministers are still in office. Some are there because the political cost of removing them is assessed as higher than the governance cost of keeping them. Some are there because the positions they hold give the administration political leverage that no governance argument can easily outweigh. Some are there because the president's political advisors have concluded that the Nigerian electorate's tolerance for ministerial performance failure is high enough
that the documented record will not translate into electoral consequence in 2027. That last calculation is the most dangerous on this list, not because it is wrong, but because it may be right. And a political system that retains dangerous ministers because the electorate's accountability threshold is low is a political system that will produce the same ministers, the same governance failures, and the same updated list every electoral cycle until that threshold changes. The threshold changes when analysis like this is shared widely enough to become a political cost. Share this video, challenge the analysis, correct it where it is wrong, and demand from your legislators, from your press, from your civil society, the kind of sustained ministerial accountability that Nigerian governance has needed since 1999. You now know something that most Nigerians watching the news tonight do not know. What you do with that is up to you. Share it, debate it, challenge it. That is how democracies survive. AfroNewsHQ. Nigeria deserves better analysis. See you in the next one.